body aches, disabling fatigue, vomiting, then red spots and pus all over the body, disfiguring scars, and finally death in 1 out of 7 cases. These are symptoms of a disease that appeared in Asia and Africa, which became catastrophic when its virus mutated in the 16th century, infecting 9 out of 10 Europeans and becoming a global epidemic. This disease, smallpox, eradicated in 1980, is the only infectious disease that has been eradicated in history thanks to the spread of vaccination throughout the world. While the history of eradication of smallpox is now well known, one of the important figures in the fight against smallpox is much less known or even masked. Hello and welcome to a Sankofa that takes you this morning to America for a rediscovery flight about Onesimus, the African slave who changed the fight against smallpox in the 18th century.
African History Daily by my daddy.
Boston, Massachusetts, one of the first ports of entry for the first slaves in America in 1638. By 1700, about 1,000 slaves were already in the colony, which they helped build. But from 1706, Boston is infamous for the deadly smallpox epidemics that hit it. Half of the city's 11 inhabitants are infected with bodies everywhere. That same year, 1706, a slave from West Africa was bought for a prominent Puritan minister by his congregation. It is amazing how some people find themselves at the crossroad of milestones in history, because this minister in question is called Cotton Mather, the same one who had played a leading role in the infamous so-called Salem witches trials. Cotton Mather converted his slave to Christianity to wash him off all his evil African rites, and he was christened Onesimus, which means useful, named after Onesimus in the New Testament, a man who met Paul in prison. His master didn't hold any particular regard for Onesimus, but described him as being mean, useless, mocking, but very intelligent. However, the wheel turned. In 1716, Onesimus informed his master that he got protection against smallpox after having undergone some kind of operation in Africa that gave him a little amount of dose of smallpox. The operation he referred to involved taking pus from an infected person, putting it on the cut skin of a healthy person, which then provided protection against the disease. Cotton Mather was fascinated and made inquiries of the other slaves, most of whom had the scars on their arms. He also learned that this practice was used in Turkey and China. Cotton Mather, the anti-sorcerer of Salem, then became an evangelist of this method of prevention by inoculation, also known as variolation, which he spread throughout Massachusetts and elsewhere. But Cotton Mather is not Jesus, and clearly he got reminded of that as he faced the reluctance of white population to submit to a medical procedure they thought was developed by or for black slaves. As for the religious, they preached that he was contrary to the will of God to expose his creatures to dangerous diseases. According to historian Ted Wilmer, Cotton Mather was vilified, insulted, and even received death threats. But one must believe that his God did not abandon him, because in 1721 a miracle happened. That miracle is called Dr. Boylston, the only doctor in town who have accepted to test this technique when a new massive outbreak of smallpox broke out. Boylston went into action, inoculating his own son, his slaves, and many other Bostonians, vaccinating a total of 242 people, of which a significant proportion was protected against smallpox compared to those who did not undergo the procedure. In the end, the smallpox epidemic killed 844 people in Boston, more than 14% of the population, but the foundation of vaccination was laid. A few decades later, Edward Jenner developed an effective vaccine using cowpox to induce immunity against smallpox in humans. a celebration of the intelligence and generosity of Onesimus, a real unauthorized African hero. My African cliché of the day is the vaccine industry today, which brings tens of billions of dollars to a small group of companies marketing vaccines on the continent at sometimes prohibitive prices. A continent where the descendants of Onesimus still can't manage to finance by themselves to vaccinate their children and still fail to install a Pan-African vaccine industry. It is not known if Onesimus lived long enough to see the success of this technique, since his contribution has disappeared from the history books on public health, as indeed most of the other medical contribution and knowledge of pre-colonial Africa, such as the making of ultra-realist prostheses of Pharaonic Africa or successful C-section under anesthesia by baNyoro people in present-day Uganda. How many Africans today are themselves skeptical about the stories of this African technical ingenuity of the past? Could it be due to inferiority complex or brainwashing? What else? It's up to you to think about it. Thank you and see you on board next Monday. Bye.